Hi, welcome to another Google Hangout, and today we have a guest from the US, Joe Kou. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Marlen.
So, how are you doing? We will be discussing with you a very interesting topic, which has to do a lot with our current ongoing world of revelations in terms of how our government operates and all of the media for now exposing all that is apparently wrong with our society, and that we as individuals haven't really taken hands on the matter, because sometimes we see ourselves as separate from, let's say, the political realm. And I understand that you've been focusing on investigating more about politics, and let's talk about redefining politics. What is it all about for you?
For me, this came from realizing that our world is determined not just by politicians and political cycles that happen every 4 years or what have you. That's obviously relevant. It's part of our world, and it does, in a very big way, kind of set the structure of what can happen. But to say that our world is determined only by that kind of politics is wrong, and the reason for that is we as individuals, every single day, the decisions that we make individually in every moment of our lives, all of those decisions are political decisions. So every time that we see something wrong in our world, and we don't investigate the things that we personally do in our own lives that we know is not best for everybody, but we keep doing it anyway, why do we do that? We do that because there's this idea that it's the government's problem. It's society's problem. This is what's here. I have to survive. I have to do these things for me. And it's interesting because we blame the government for that exact same mentality of only looking out for the government's own interests. So instead of looking at politics as what's wrong with politics and politicians, and why is it that they can't seem to get their stuff together and help us out, we also have to look at our own individual part in all of this. And for me, that's what redefining politics is about. It's looking at myself as an individual. I'm not special. I'm not in any way better than anyone else, but I am here. And in that, I'm equal, and we are all equal in the fact that we're all living here in the same planet, same world, and we are bound by the fact that our collective decisions, individually and as groups, as families, as couples, as communities, all of those decisions do have an impact, and the degree to which we're not aware of that impact is really doing us a disservice.
Exactly, because if we look at the current perspective or the current opinion or conception of politics is, a bunch of people that only deal with problems that I don't understand at all, and my only right as a citizen is to go and vote. What is all about this idea of the current democracy, quote unquote, that we have, and how we haven't really linked it to this point of self-responsibility that you're mentioning? What's going on in our society?
This is a pretty multidimensional issue because it relates to personal and interpersonal relationships that we've come to accept and not question. It comes from us being born. From the day that we enter the world, we are born into, most of us, born into a situation where our responsibilities are, for the most part, kind of taken care of for us. We're a baby. We're taken care of. We already have this respect for authority, and there's nothing wrong with that, but the issue is it over time becomes a dependency that we never actually grew out of. We still abdicate so much, and just for example, to make this more tangible, in the course of a day, I find myself kind of going into this mode of autopilot where I'm just really doing what I've always been doing, what I've learned to do, but I don't question it. For example, if I go to the store and I buy something, I'm not looking at the effects of where my money is going to, what my money is supporting, what had to happen to make this store be here. What about all the employees? Are they getting a fair wage? Do they like their jobs? Do I like my job? I don't like my job, so would they like their job? Now, these questions seem a bit schizophrenic, but it is so because we don't actually question. We put off this point of questioning. So it seems like, wow, am I crazy for really considering all of this? Or am I crazy for not having considered all of this for so much of my life that I kind of just let life happen, and I let politics happen, and I let world events happen right before my eyes, and I have not learned to see my part in it.
Yeah, precisely. That's one aspect that all of us as human beings have collectively dismissed of our reality. Like, yeah, you're born and you learn about the Constitution, quote unquote, thoroughly, but really not. You learn that there's a government taking care of you, and we just take for granted every aspect of how we get our basic services, how the money system runs, and it all becomes like a belief system that we don't investigate in any way further. So it becomes like another belief of a religion, for example, that we don't have any tangible access to verifying how it works. How do people come to make these decisions? Are they really what is best for all? Do I really even understand what best for all means? In terms of the educational aspect and politics, for example, what has been your perspective and your own experience in relation to this? Because there's a lack, obviously, of the understanding of this new definition of politics that you're proposing.
Yeah, in terms of education, one of the points I struggled with in the beginning when I made this decision within myself, like, okay, I'm seeing this issue, no one else is talking about it. Does that mean I should just shut up and be quiet and fit in and deal with all this conflict in me and just kind of holding in a fart for the rest of my life? And I got to a point of realizing, like, yeah, I am not trained as a politician. I have not had the access to that education in my life because of my financial constraints, because of my living constraints. I have not had an access to a kind of living or a kind of networking or a kind of support structure that would allow me to do that kind of studying and investigation. And I also don't have access to money or having large financial backers who will want to put me into a position of politics so that I can do something in return for them. I don't have any of that. And it was interesting because I thought that disqualified me from being politically responsible, which is actually the reverse, because that is the situation that right now the majority of human beings are in. So to answer the question practically in terms of education, education should not limit one's political awareness or responsibility. It really doesn't take that much. For me, it took a process of letting go of the things that really didn't matter, and to get to that, I had to look at questioning what did matter. Does it matter?
You mean in
that
terms of personal problems, or what do you mean by things that didn't matter?
Personal living. So it starts with redefining yourself. Things that matter, like real stuff that matters. Does it matter that I come home and be able to turn on my computer and play video games for 17 hours until my next workday? Does that really matter to me? It can make me happy, or I think it makes me happy. At least it distracts me long enough so I don't have to answer any questions. But it was a process of starting to let that go, and the more I did that, the more I realized I have a lot of time on my hands that was channeled to things that wasn't supporting me or anyone else in this world, and that can be transferred into study, and it really doesn't take that much to get yourself caught up on what's happening in the world, because it really starts with you looking at what's happening in your world, and that's the foundation. It's not about learning worldwide economic policy because you apparently need that to have awareness. No, you look at your own living. How does your contribution day to day in your work, in your studies, in your living, in your personal environments, all of those dynamics, all of that is politics. All of that is contributing to the way we're relating to each other and how we're using that relationship to form the greater world. So the more we develop that sense of looking just at our own lives, the decisions that we're making at a very personal level, very simple. Those are the same foundations that lead to bigger decisions in the community levels, in political levels. So it really is redefining yourself. And in this, education is the education that you give yourself, about the way you live, about you making your decisions. So I think that is the education that one needs to have, not necessarily having political science as a background, although it does help if you want to be more articulate about these issues. But I think that is the key education, the education of who we are, and being willing to redefine who we are first.
Yeah, precisely. That I absolutely agree with everything that you've said, beginning with the individual, realizing our own participation, because in essence, as we know, the government, the system in itself is not some greater atmospheric entity in itself. It is that we relate to each other, how we relate to ourselves, the decisions that we make, what we buy, what we don't buy, how we spend our time. So I definitely agree with everything that you've said, and also this aspect of redefining politics as, let's say, open source politics, which means it's not that you have to be an institutional politician, you know, to be able to say or have a say within society, because that's also what we've witnessed, I mean, throughout time, that we tend to say, well, I don't have the credentials to speak about these topics. Why not? I mean, these are aspects that are related to everyone that is participating in this world system, as you were explaining. So what would be, for example, the relationship that you see in the context of what we're proposing as living income guaranteed, which is in essence a political decision that we all have to grant ourselves? What is your perspective on this?
It's very interesting when I look at the living income guarantee, and I mean, we have never been in a shortage of potential solutions. I mean, even if you look at things like the Venus Project or resource-based economies, those are all great ideas, and there really isn't anything stopping us from putting those into real practice, except for, again, it's who we are, our relationships. So what are we not wanting to let go of? Where are our conflicts that are keeping us from making those ideas practical? And that's what we have to look at. For me, a living income guarantee is a very practical proposal based on the real issues and the real structure of the world that we're in. It's less idealistic in many respects because it's working with the current system, and I really like that. But I would still bring it back to the point of, okay, it's a great proposal, it makes sense, but why hasn't it already been implemented if it made so much sense? I think that is what people are missing. I think it's the idea that we've been so separate from our own lives, we've been so isolated into our personal issues that we lost focus of what we can accomplish when we come to an agreement. And in terms of the living income guarantee, it's about a common agreement. It's a platform where we can commonly agree that poverty is not acceptable. Poverty should be, in a way, regarded as an infraction on human rights. It should be an intrinsic thing that should not ever be violated. If we have a solid agreement there, then it really just becomes an issue of logistics. So the question here would be, are we still fighting over logistics? Are we still fighting over things that we're still wanting and not really wanting to change and let go of in our personal living, in our personal definition of who we are? Are we still attached to the way that things are currently going because we think we might get ahead, even though the whole world is suffering? So in terms of a living income guarantee, I think it's a great idea, and I think it's high time we investigate ourselves and our relationships and ask the question of why it has not been already implemented in this world, and to get to work at sorting those things out, because ultimately change is not hard when the vision is clear and there's a clear agreement between the masses. A very quick example would be how our societies deal with murder. I mean, commonly people have a very clear idea, a very clear agreement. Murder is not in any way acceptable. Okay, so we don't have any problem putting in policies. We don't have any problem doing whatever we have to do individually to make sure murder isn't happening in our societies, in our world, to the extent that we can. Some people are in situations where they don't have any resource to enforce that kind of stuff. But generally, as a majority of humans, we agree that murder is not cool. And it's very easy to then set up policy, set up government, set up infrastructure, because the vision was clear. Everything else was just logistics. So I see the same thing with living income. When we can agree that poverty is not acceptable, that we have to take responsibility for changing it, and that requires that we change the way we live, the way we interact with money, and be willing to face that, then it really won't be so hard to implement.
Exactly. That's also one of the points that we were discussing in our last hangout with people from Basic Income, realizing that we have a common ground, and as human beings we have to stick to finding this common ground and work on it. And also realizing that it is not only like a voting process, like asking for a basic income, but realizing precisely what you have explained here, that personal responsibility, the individual, who am I, for example, within this system, and who would I be if I get this money? Would I contribute to my society? Would I start participating in democratic decisions? Would I suggest that many more or new platforms for political decision making is created, such as the liquid democracy that the Pirate Party is working on? All of these are, things that we are, as human beings, as different groups, proposing solutions, working on. And if we can agree on what's best for all, such as what we can agree on what's not cool, like crime, then obviously, for example, obtaining money will get you out of that state of having to resort to crime to, for example, get your basic necessities. Yeah. So what would you say as, a last word on this topic in relation to the current state of affairs, so to speak, in terms of politics, and what you would recommend just to any regular person in relation to the boogeyman that, usually is politics?
Yeah, in terms of what I would recommend for people to start, and as well as for me to keep going, is developing the awareness and the willingness to not judge anything. Anything that we look at in our world that seems bad and seems wrong and we feel victimized to realize that, yeah, things are very much stacked against us, but how did it get this way? It didn't just happen without our participation, because the absence of our participation is participation. And we have to look at, instead of judging the banks, or instead of judging the highly overpaid CEOs of major corporations for their greed, we have to look at what we all had to do as a society to allow that greed to begin with, and what are we doing as individuals that led to that. And when we get to that point, we realize we really are responsible for everything, and that doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't mean you have to now go out and sell all your stuff and, be a monk. It's realizing that when we realize this together, we can make decisions together as well. So the first start is to look at the events in the world and trace it back to yourself and see how you are an active participant in creating that. That maybe it looks like you alone don't have that much power, but the fact is we're not alone. We're billions of people. And as a conglomerate, that's how we change this world, whether we're aware of it or not. So that's redefining politics in a nutshell.
Yeah, of course, and we would like to take, for example, the usual saying of 99% versus the 1%. The 99% is all the majority that is in this belief that someone else has to take care of our business, when it is in fact the 99% that has the actual strength, the actual power to decide how we run our lives. And that is primarily one of the foundations also of living income guarantee, that it is not only demanding, for example, for a basic income, but understanding that it's equal rights and equal responsibility. And this is something that will be open for discussion to everyone that's watching. Leave your comments, participate. Joe Kou is a regular participant in the Living Income Guaranteed Hangouts in the comment section as well, which we appreciate, Joe, as well. And also check out the links in the info section to understand more about the Living Income Guaranteed, as well as joining us every Sunday at the same time. And thanks, Joe, for your participation. Very cool.
Thank you. Thank you, Marlen.
And it's time to get politically active with making these basic decisions of, for example, granting us all a right to a dignified living with the Living Income Guarantee. Thank you, and till next time.